Welcome to 52 Miniatures. We're going to look at what I think makes a great diorama, what I consider when planning one, as well as go through how I build one. The most important thing with a diorama is that it's one scene that tells a story. Creating a scene that you can almost imagine the smell of, hear the sound of, where a story unfolds in front of your eyes. Storytelling. I think sometimes the idea of a diorama gets mixed up with, quote, extravagant display base, unquote. I don't consider them to be the same thing. Placing a miniature in a fancy-looking setting is not always storytelling. I've been wanting to do this specific diorama for some time, a space marine in for maintenance and a fresh coat of paint. A story I like to tell often is one with mixed looks and style, like this one, mashing up different worlds and concepts. I also kind of like mundane tasks rather than epic battle scenes. I think a sort of relatable story is easier to convey, and I think this helps make dioramas feel, well, unrealistically real. A way to make alternative future history is by mixing historical scale models with sci-fi miniatures, like Warhammer miniatures. Yet this feat can be difficult to pull off with Warhammer miniatures. Space Marines, for example, are either too small or too big to fit well with the most common scale model scales. And they're modeled in more of a cartoon style called heroic scale, rather than the realistic scale model style called true scale. So when I found 3D models of true scale, sort of Space Marines on Instagram, I got pretty excited. Obviously playing with the Space Marine aesthetic, but sculpted in true scale. Essentially trying to render proportions based on real anatomy concepts, but scaled down to miniature size. Just like scale models. So the idea is kind of simple. A World War II tank refurbishing crew will become sci-fi maintenance painter guys, fixing up a Space Marine. The Space Marine, resin 3D printed at 120% to sort of tower over the workers. I tend to look for matching head size when mixing up miniature concepts. In this case, imagining one of the scale model miniatures' heads with a helmet on, trying to match the sci-fi warrior's head to that image. The concept that a warrior 40,000 years into the future would be given a coat of paint with a paintbrush is funny. It brings the entire wild sci-fi concept down to something mundane and low-tech, kind of sucking out the magic, replacing it with the smell of motor oil, diesel and turpentine. It gives the common man a place in the 40k-ish universe, something I can miss at times. Just imagine how many workers lay behind the massive armies of the future. And don't spoil my argument with talks of automation. So the miniatures have in fact birthed the scene and the story. I think this is the best start, not forcing miniatures into a scene, rather having miniatures that tell the story or that you see a story in, even without a scene. And then try to enhance that mood with the diorama environment. So what would complement these miniatures? A workshop of some kind? The Second World War-styled mechanics bring a lo-fi vibe, and the Marine is, for a lack of a better term, realistic. To me, the setting should be utilitarian, worn, faded, and everyday-like. Coffee breaks and backache. I don't feel the shiny holographic panels or gold-adorned chambers, no green forests or muddy battlefields. Instead, I see concrete, cracked ventilation shafts, rusty wiring. The bowels of a bunker, perhaps, something you'd find in one of these Fallout vaults, only this vault didn't quite stick to keeping things maintained and jolly. And maybe some kind of tiles, easy to wash, to clean, a drain maybe, for cleaning up overspray and spilled paint. I find it's difficult to imagine or sketch out exactly how large a diorama should be and what it should contain. Size is surprisingly easy to misjudge and a scene is easy to clutter. I find the best is to do a physical mock-up. Nothing fancy, just some pieces of cardboard representing what you're going for. The miniatures can be placed in the mock-up and you get instant confirmation on where things are heading. This is a great opportunity to try out different angles. Is your story told from a 45-degree side angle? Is there elevation? What does this do to your story? Mine, this time, I think is best told from the front, with the massive marine dead center taking up all the focus. Like the lead character in a play on a theatre stage, letting the surrounding scene sort of unfold around it as the eye wanders. A scene prone to more action or movement can often benefit from something more of a side angle. Experiment and see what works. Now, what I'd like to convey with the build itself is that dioramas can be crafted with simple means. I'm not saying it's necessarily easy to do, but I want to say that you don't necessarily need to buy tons of super specialized tools or materials to make one. Obviously, I'll use what I've got. I won't stint, but still hopefully give some examples of mundane materials that can be the start of a great scene. I try not to worry too much about scale accuracy or imagined realism when building, not worrying about what makes sense or try to explain the reason for things or their exact placement in a diorama. Instead, I just try to trust my eyes and to, with as few components as possible, convey the story. Put things where you think they look good. To me, dioramas are different from, say, miniature wargame scenery or accurate scale model buildings. Dioramas are more like building a film set. We have the power to play with perspective, to trick the eye, be it on purpose or just because you thought it looked better. We can also use symbolism rather than realism to tell a story. A tree can convey the story of a forest. You might not need to build the entire forest. And a wall can be larger or smaller than what makes mathematical or scale sense, yet render a more pleasing visual result. By repeatedly placing the model in what you're working on, then taking decisions based on what you see rather than what makes logical sense is something I think is key to creating a look that works with the model and the story at hand. And you'll create a scene that is personal to you, one that you will hopefully appreciate to keep working on. Personally, I think as much crafting as possible is a great benefit. You know, you can 3D print an entire scene or buy scale model bits, houses and such. I've done so many times. But there's something about, say, making your own tiles, laying your own bricks, sculpting your own tree, that not only adds to the unique look of a build, you kind of unconsciously shape whatever you're crafting to fulfill your story, instead of shaping your story around the ready-made bits you've got at hand. Many materials can be used for more things than they're intended to be used as. A rust texture paste can be used as miniature tile grout. Tile grout can be used as miniature texture paste. A ruined brush can become sprouting grass, and so on. Obviously, buying lots of fun things in a hobby store is not a pleasure I want to take away from you, but sometimes you have more options available to you than you think you do. One demonstration of this in the build at hand is the sheet of foam core that is the back wall of the diorama. Not only is it a structural part of the build, but also by sanding it with sandpaper, I've given it a slightly rough, plastery surface that works in the scene itself. And by in places ripping out the paper, exposing the foam underneath, I've created what looks like holes in the plaster, revealing a crumbling concrete surface underneath. I'd now like to touch on something we could almost call religious. This will be the mumbo-jumbo part of the video, something all videos should have. We are creatures with spirit, after all. Personally, I consider this to be the most important piece of advice. Take it seriously or not. Semi-consciously, unconsciously, and fully consciously, my dioramas are a balance of uneven numbers. The best number is 3. Very important number, 3. But when 3 is not possible, keep doubling up, or down. 5 rows of tiles. 3 tiles on the back wall. 3 pipes. 3 major holes in the plaster of the back wall. 1 drain in the floor. 5 other details on the back wall if we count the electric cables as one element, which I do. 3 electric cables. 3 humanoid miniatures. 5 miniature elements if we count ladder and compressor. 1 space marine. This, by the way, means duels are notoriously difficult to get grips on and often need a third feature to work. For fun, have a look at images of golden demon-winning duel scenes and you'll find that when there's only 2 miniatures dueling, a third element has often been added somehow into the scene. If so only by the use of paint. Anyway, humans don't make sense, and I recommend sticking to an uneven approach for a more harmonious visual experience. And I think my diorama is a harmonious visual experience and is really cool. And again, this is important. I'm the one building it, spending the time on it. So yeah, you do something you think is cool, and you'll enjoy spending time on it. Mine is a little different, using the realistic scale model approach. That's just me. By no means is that something you should follow. Wood elves exploding because of giant rat-wielding weird gun is also cool. Or no fantasy element at all. That's cool too. I just hope you feel inspired to build a little scene with whatever you like to see in front of your eyes. In an uneven kind of manner. I've decided to not paint the diorama in this video. Let the build speak for itself, I say. I've given the diorama a zenithal prime to bring the details out for you, and as a base for me to work on in the future. Be sure this video will continue with the painting part. Painting is as important as the build and can really add to your story. I also think painting a diorama is different from painting the one-off miniature, so stay tuned for part 2. Please like and subscribe, continue to watch videos, tell your friends, and if possible consider checking out my Patreon to support the continued creation of videos like this one. A link to my Patreon can be found by the end of this video and down in the description. Thank you for watching. Bye.